Hey, Lawrence. Welcome to the His and Her Money
Hello,
Show.
Lawrence.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, we are glad to have you here. You've been on quite a financial, personal journey that is truly remarkable. You started from the bottom and you've been climbing your way up to levels way above from where you were. And I think that we're all going to learn a lot from the journey that you've been on. But before we start talking about your story, can you just say hello to everyone that's tuned in to the show and let them know what you're all about?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lawrence Gonzalez. I'm Haitian Brazilian, coming from Miami, Florida, but I currently live in Washington, D.C. I am a government auditor, so as such, I'm not here to audit anybody here. I'm just having a good time, and I also love to give back to my community by going to do financial literacy seminars, speaking to elementary school, middle school, high school, because we have to carterize the debt that we have in our community.
All right. So now, one time in your life, you were down, 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 deep in debt. At
Yes.
one point in your life, you had a net worth that was negative six figures. And now you're at another point in your life where you have a positive six-figure net worth. So let's rewind the clock back, though. Talk about how you found yourself deep in debt. Break down how much debt you were in totality and the type of debt that it was.
At one point back in 2012, so it seems like we were winding it all the way back to that time, I was probably in negative $120,000 worth of debt. $90,000 of it was in student loans, and the other, what, five or $10,000 were in credit card debt or something that was floating around in the background. I paid off some of the student loans from undergrad, but however, I still kept a lot of that graduate loan, and that ended up really costing me a lot. So in the end, I had about $120,000, and by the time I actually got hold of myself and I tried to figure it out, I was $116,000 in debt, and I moved all the way up to 116,000 in a plus side. So that was pretty awesome.
Now, you said when I finally got a hold of myself, what was that? What happened where you had your wake up call, your moment where you felt like things needed to change?
I think for a lot of us, that time is when you kind of give your credit card to the cashier, and it kind of bounces back at you, and you do that look at you look at them, you kind of squint, and you say run it again, and they turn it back to you, and you say run it one more time, and then you realize there's something wrong. So I went back home and I thought, okay, I'm gonna call my credit card. I'm gonna let them, give them a piece of my mind that it didn't work. But turns out I was actually over on my credit cards. So it bounced for exactly the right reason. And at that point, I decided to start looking and focusing on what I was spending my money on. And one of those things was food. I was spending over $375 a month on food, and I couldn't tell you what I was eating. Besides kind of like going through the college motion of it all, like you go to Publix, you get a couple of snacks here and there. Maybe you hit up a Waffle House. At the end of the day, I'm spending $375 a month on food that I probably wasn't cooking enough. I was throwing away, and I was just eating pretty much junk food. And at the time, I was in a quad with three other guys, three of my friends, and each of them were considering me the cheap one. So I did the totality of the household. One of the guys was spending $400 at least on food. The other guy was spending $600. One of the guys was spending $700 because he was eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner just outside the house. So as an entire household, we're spending about $2,400 a month on just food that we couldn't even remember what we were eating.
Wow.
It taught me a lot.
Yeah, right. Talk about an aha moment and you kind of wake up. So once you realized how much money you were spending and you're like, man, I need to get a hold of myself. What were the steps that you started to, you know, step out or pace out yourself? Like, did you create a budget? Like, walk us through your process in that area.
The first thing I did was actually sign up for mint.com. I think, a lot of people know about it in the financial literacy world. It's just a great tool where you can see your budget and what you're spending on, and you can see where your problem areas are. So in that sense, I was able to understand, one, I was overeating or overspending on that. I was overspending on gas. I was also spending on rent. So I was able to formulate a budget for myself. At the time, too, I got out of school, but I didn't have a job. So that was extremely difficult, especially post recession. Trying to pick up a job. In my first job out of college, I was making $23,000 before tax. What do you mean that when Uncle Cam comes in, he just takes the rest of the money? He just really takes majority of that money. So I went in that first day with a bit of what I call gratitude, not because I'm just happy that I had a job to begin with. So I was able to start off with just a good positive frame of mind and a focus on just producing my positive future per se. So I dressed the part. I woke up every morning. Even the first day, one of the guys said, he looked at me in the eye and said, everybody else that got that job actually quit. And he laughed at me. I'm like, this is the first day I showed up. I was free, fresh cut. Everything was going well. And it just seems like the first thing he says is like, you're not going to make it. Suffice to say, about 6 months later, I was able to turn that job into the next job I had for $32,000 before tax. And 6 months after that, I was able to turn that into $64,000. Basically, in a year, I went from $21,000 to $64,000. And about 2 years after that, I was at $100,000 a year.
Wow.
Talk about this, because that could have worked against you had you not began the work of changing your mindset, because you just said you like tripled your salary within the first 12 months of getting that job. And if you had not had that moment where the credit card got rejected and you started down the path that you went on, that new money could have took you down the consumer rabbit hole and had you really, really bogged down, even more so than you were. How important is it to address mindsets when you are trying to turn your financial situation around?
It's 100% essential, because when I got to DC, especially the brunch capital of the world per se, I went to one brunch with a couple guys, and they say, "Hey, you came to DC, we're gonna treat you," which was a lie because they just wanted me to just show up there, and they were eating up. We were getting some tapas. If everybody ever seen tapas, they're just small little meals that don't really quite fill you up. So I was there. I bought one tapa and one drink, and that was my limit because I didn't have any more room on the credit card. So at that time, those guys kept on buying more and more. One of the ladies like, "Oh, we're gonna get dessert. We're gonna get this. We're gonna get that." At the end of the night, when I was still starving, and the cashier came by, she said, "Hey, do you guys want to split the check?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, split the check." I ended up spending $75 for just one tapa and one drink.
Oh my gosh.
At that point, it just really solidifies something that's been going on, especially in the community in DC, is that everybody's eating out, having this time. Then when you walk away from it, you're just not that happy. So instead of just wasting my time at happy hours, wasting my time at like meetups with different people I didn't care for, I started focusing on myself and actually trying to build myself up. So I did things like join Toastmasters, which actually helped. I also helped a lot of different people with their resumes, so in order to get them a job as well. So it's just entirely crucial and critical that you have to do that, change your mindset.
Yeah. And talk about your upbringing a little bit. I think that also, and you can correct us if we're wrong, played a role in why you were so determined to kind of, make it and try to build your career and get out of debt. And now you're trying to work on your net worth. So talk about, what did your childhood or your upbringing have to do with that as well?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know I grew up in Haiti till 9 years old. So for me, seeing people that never made over $20,000 is just like the norm. That's just the way we live. My grandma probably never seen more than $15,000 a year, but she raised 6 kids on that. So you just, when you get to the point where you start making a certain amount of money and you start thinking about your grandmother, your mom. My mom still doesn't make anywhere over $30,000 a year. It started really telling me that I need to focus in on my spending and focus in on just kind of building my family legacy in a different way. Because these people were able to make a way out of no way, as they used to say, a way out of just no way at all, where they make every dime work, every philosophy work, every inch of it all just kind of go the distance. And for me, that really made a lot of sense. Um, my grandmother had a small little cafe, and every day afterwards, I still never forget it, that they'll show up, and I might have been 4 or 3, they'll show up with this little book where they were basically writing down notes, and it was basically like a ledger, a general ledger for the day. In that time, they ended up just, every time I watch them, like, this is like a secret language. They were notating down numbers, numbers, numbers. And for me, really, I don't know why, but it just clicked. There was something about tracking money that made a lot of sense. And for me, I used that same philosophy and started using my Excel spreadsheets and my know-how with that to actually construct a better budget for myself.
Talk about, when you were first, after you had that moment where you like, I need to get my finances in order, you kind of went on a journey to increase your financial literacy because nobody had shared this stuff with you before. And you found yourself like in a quandary, like this expert says this and this expert says that. And you realize that personal finance is personal, right? So kind of walk us through that part of your journey.
Yes, when you're going online, you're hearing bloggers, podcasters, you kind of listen to some authenticity in their story because their story is their own story. There's something that happened to them that actually, impact them. Maybe they were great sales pitchers, so they were able to sell different houses, or maybe they're just good at repairing houses, so they ended up buying and flipping, or maybe they're just great at talking to different people, so they end up being podcasters. But for me, in order for me to make that level of money, I had to focus in on what made me great, what made me, I guess, inspirational to others, which is the way I use money, my know-how about taxation. So instead of doing something like Dave Ramsey would actually say, which is to pay down all your debt, I actually ended up focusing on paying down my consumer debt and also the smaller student loans. Instead of paying all of them at one time, which would probably take me maybe 15 years to do, because it's like basically like $100,000 of student loan debt. I ended up just paying the small ones, keeping the biggest one on public student loan forgiveness plan, and from that point on, maximize my 401k, maximize my IRA, and as well as maximize my HSA. So I created a new plan for myself based off even things that you guys have said all the time, making your personal finances personal for you. Other people would say that's not necessarily as logical. They'll say that the interest rates might do this and that. But at the end of the day, it didn't make me feel comfortable. It didn't really work for me. So I had to create something that really worked for people that comes from a certain background, that doesn't have a lot of inheritance, that doesn't have a lot of like financial know-how, but maximizing every little piece that we can get.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Everybody's situation is different,
Yeah.
and everybody, whatever they bring in the household, whether it be income, side hustles, whatever their circumstance, everybody is different. And so I think that you said it best: maximize what you've been given and come up with a plan for yourselves individually. So yeah, I love that.
I think you call it your net max plan. So for those who have never heard that before, kind of walk us through the different components of that.
So instead of going about financial literacy in a way that is a little bit more abstract, not everybody's great at math. So I'm trying to get to the point where making the idea of being financially wealthy universal. It's not just something specific to a subgroup of people, but it could be for all of us. So I actually found out mathematically that if you make probably in a household of $77,000 a year, and you maximize all these different leverages as far as your 401k, trying to get that matching, that's $19,000 a year that you and your spouse could put in individually. You could put that in. You could put $6,000 per person, which is $12,000 in the end for you and your spouse, as well as $6,500 or so for a family HSA. That automatically puts you in a higher bracket than the 10%. A lot of experts love to say, hey, just put in 10% of your savings, it's gonna work out. But in truth, they're not putting in 10%. Ask them how much are they putting in, because they know it's just not gonna cut it in the next couple of years. So it's best to maximize as much of your money at all times. And at the same time, I also instruct people to prioritize the thing that they love in their own life. So for me, I don't care for brunches, but other people do. For me, I don't care for, I care for traveling. Other people don't. So we have to start prioritizing the things that really bring us the maximum amount of happiness in order for us to move forward. I ended up buying a home in Largo, which is not too far from Washington, D.C., basically the last metro stop. But a lot of people, they rather stay in D.C. paying rent of upwards of $15,000 a month. Whereas when I went to Largo, it was $550, and I had to split 2-2. I ended up buying a unit down here and also house hacking the other side to a buddy of mine that showed up as well. And we ended up just living in a great space, maximum amount of room to develop and grow. We have a fireplace. You got everything that you need. But instead of spending that $1,500 a month in DC, we ended up just spending $1,000 over here for a 2-2. It's an incredible shift of how you could use your money better. So you can actually use the excess now to either pay down debt or to travel with it. I was able to travel to Brazil twice in the last 3 years. I was also able to travel to 12 countries in 14 days this summer with my girlfriend, which is, in 5 years ago, I would never consider that as a possibility in my life.
Does your credit score have you down and looking for solutions? You may just find the answers you're looking for with Credit Sesame. Credit Sesame is your solution for a free no-hassle credit score, credit analysis, and tips for managing your money. They are here to help you take control of and have the tools you need to bring about a bright financial future. Get empowered today. There's no credit card required. Receive identity theft protection up to $50,000. And discover a marketplace for credit and loan officers that will help you get to your next level. Visit hisandhermoney.com/credit sesame for more details.
So talk about this, because you said that it is important to put the things that are important to you to spend money in that direction. So talk practically around someone who heard that, and maybe traveling, just as an example, is important to them. So how did you craft a plan where you're able to spend money on traveling, which is something that you love, while still sending money towards your debt, while still sending money towards investment?
The first thing is that if you listen to anybody, there's a financial order of operation that we all have to follow. It's just the general rules of finances. It's in there. It's built in. One, you don't over leverage the amount of house that you buy. So instead of buying these 5-bedroom homes, whatnot, you could just live in a 2-bedroom home. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to change that mindset to begin with. You also have to lower the amount of money you're spending on eating out. It's not to say that you can't eat out every once in a while, but if you're eating out every day at the tune of what, 10 bucks or 15 bucks per meal, that's going to end up costing you. So you're trying to explain to people not that they can't enjoy what they want to enjoy, but if you want to do something else with that money, just know that that's where it's going to be. So if you cut out a little bit of eating out, you could start saving. If you cut out where you shift from where you live at, you could start saving. If you cut down a lot of the subscriptions that we have now, either it be Netflix, Hulu, or anything, and work with other people. Work with your friends, work with your family. Just, group hack. I don't know what you want to call it. Just do whatever it takes to really lower the amount of expenditures that you have every day in your life.
And then you talked about house hacking. So walk us through that deal that you
process,
did with your friend, because somebody man, that sounds interesting, but I don't know how to do that.
Okay. The house hacking is kind of simple. It's the idea of buying a 2-bedroom home and just renting out the extra space. That's really what it comes down to. I ended up buying a 2-bedroom in Largo for $135,000, and the actual mortgage and HOA ended up being $1,000. So when my buddy shows up, I just rented the extra room to him at a discount, which he would have been paying $1,200 a month anyways for housing in DC. I cut it in half, and he only paid me $600. So out of that house itself, I was paying $400, and he was paying $600. And we were living pretty much a lot cheaper than we would have been if we rented a space in DC. Both of us would be paying $2,400 a month, but instead we end up paying $1,000 and having a whole heck of a lot more room. So if it's not for everybody, because if you don't like your roommates, if you like your friends that much and you love your peace of mind and your Zen time, then it's a different scenario. But if you you could hack it for the moment. If you're young, you're not married or something like that, you could just kind of wing it. You have friends, live with them, save the money. You can even end up traveling together a lot more as well.
So talk about that. How should it be set up? I'm assuming that it could be set up either way. So if your friend is basically living in another room, do you guys still split the utility bills? How does that work?
Well, for me, because I kind of like my friends, I kind of say, hey, you're coming in at a reduced rate anyway, which is a benefit to me. So I basically just charge them for $600 for rent and utility. Other people I've seen actually charge them for, I guess, the rent, and then they split the utilities or anything like that. But for me, I'm not a person that wants a certain equitable amount of money all the time. I'm just happy that, one, my friend is getting to cut their expenses and fixing their finances. At the same time, I'm doing the same. I think it's a win-win scenario for both of us. It doesn't have to be win-lose. It doesn't have to be one person kind of having a great time on this and kind of gouging their own friend. but it's just an opportunity for both of us to actually work together.
So, are there any other things that you're doing as well to increase your net worth?
Currently, I am working on getting more certifications behind my name. I think that's always very important. I think it's undersold in society now that, hey, education is not paramount, but it is. Everybody that has an education will tell you that it's worked for them. So trying to do that, as well as doing a rental real estate. I actually did a rental with my mom to make sure that she has retirement income in the back end as well. Because at some point she's gonna run out of money, and I want to make sure at least we have something flowing as a family that really covers her expenses as well.
Talk
As,
about that.
Yeah, unpack that deal.
Unpack
How did
that.
you
Yeah.
structure it? You know,
How does that look? What is that?
how did that deal get structured? I've actually looked at my mom's retirement income. I looked at what she would be getting, generally off of my SSA. You kind of could see what she might be getting at 62, 64, or maybe maximum retirement. I looked at a lot of her savings. I do her taxes. So I looked at what she has savings accumulation wise, and I did the numbers and see how much she's going to be pulling for retirement income. And it just was not going to be enough. So we ended up going half on the deal anyways, because it's my mom. Even if she passed away, I guess the house goes to me. So it's not like it's retains inside the family. So we split it half and half. I actually oversee all the housing stuff, getting the renters through Cozy. I do all the security, the checks and background checks with the college students, and they pay on time, and we're paying down the house as we go. So by the time she's ready to retire, it'll be at least $1,000 a month going to just support her.
So, was it a single family home that you guys purchased? Was it a 4 unit or 2 unit? How did that?
I guess I'm gonna tell everybody my secret is to actually rent in a college town. Like a lot of times people want to rent these single family unit, and this might be safe. It might be comfortable in some scenarios, but a lot of times you go to DC or Miami, the prices of those homes are already very expensive. But if you go to college towns, those prices tend to be a lot cheaper and a lot more affordable. So you're looking at what, $80,000, 120, and we bought that home for 125. So that didn't break our bank. It didn't really hurt us at all. So we ended up putting 20% down on it and renting it out for $1,200 a month. We're breaking even technically, but we're like making probably $200 on top of it every month. So it's not a bad situation to be in.
I like it. So the goal of this property is not necessarily for her to live in; it's to generate additional income for her in her retirement years.
Yes, it is. As well as if my little cousins decide to go to a Florida State University, at least they have a place to actually go. So it's taking to the entire family dynamic into consideration. So instead of spending a lot of money out of pocket, now we're going to get to a point where we put the kids where they can be, so they don't spend that much while they're in college, or we make sure that that unit just keeps getting upkept, so we could take the money back out for my mom.
Love it. Love it.
Love it.
One of the things you also mentioned earlier was the HSA, and you said you can put money in there. And I read somewhere where you said HSAs have triple tax advantage. What is that? And why is it important for us to be using these vehicles?
Yes. If I had to be candid, a lot of people of color barely ever go to the hospital. We just, typically maybe it's a culture thing, maybe it's a community thing. We just don't really frequent the hospital. At the same time, I learned in that vein that we're able to actually put in, for single people, $3,450 a year into an HSA, and it rolls over every year. So it just keeps adding up, adding up, adding up. For married couples, that's about $6,750 for families. That's what they say. And you can add up into that as well. The advantages that the actual HSA has is because, for one, you're putting money into an insurance, and on the back end, the insurance itself is actually stacking money for you inside the HSA. For example, for my HSA, I put in basically I paid the same amount of insurance, but a little bit higher with a higher deductible. So it takes away half of that money and they put the rest inside a savings account for HSAs. So about $750 at the end of the year is already stacked up inside this additional savings account that I can use for any medical emergencies that can happen. On top of that, as a tax savings that you can actually apply in your taxes themselves, you could put up to the maximum amount for singles and up to the maximum amount for families. That's another boom. On the second part is if you put in every pay period, it reduces your taxes for every pay period. This is where it gets very complicated, very mathematically inclined. But if you do so, by the end of when you see your paycheck, you will actually see a higher paycheck than you think it would be. It basically a lot more beneficial. If you think about insurances, a lot of times we paid them and we never saw anything from them. We never used them or anything like that, so they went away. But imagine if you had saved $3,000 a year in your 20s, or 3,000, yeah, maybe even from your 25 years old. So you're like 3,000. So you're adding on 555. So you now have $15,000 in your HSA. That could be used for, hey, your wife gets pregnant or you get pregnant, whatever it is. Instead of begging or instead of kind of like freaking out, you have that money available and it's on the side for you. Another advantage on top of that, inside the HSAs themselves, there's some of them that offer investment accounts. So you can actually invest portions of your HSA in the actual stock market itself. So it can also grow on top of that. At the end, there's one even more complicated benefit at the end. If you save every receipt from your expenses, you could hold on to that all the way to the end when you decide to retire, and you could take out that money basically tax-free for you. So it's just free money. At the end, when you're 64, the HSA becomes like a regular IRA. So you don't have to just use it for medical expenses. It could be used for anything. So it's the ultimate like tax advantage account. That's something that I actually have to write about to actually really get that information out to people because it's a maximum benefit for anyone.
Wow, a good way to hide some money.
Yeah.
So I guess people need to go and check with their human resources rep to find out more details about HSAs through their company and whatnot, correct?
Yeah, I think you'd want to check it out with human resources, but sometimes human resources don't even know about HSAs. You have to do the research yourself sometimes. You got to go online. You got to listen to YouTube and podcaster. They dish it out like in detail. Write it down, take some notes. But if you go to, like, I went to my HR and I asked her about HSA, she had no idea. She just said, hey, just do a regular insurance, you'll be fine. When I asked her about public student loan forgiveness, she's like, nah, just do the regular, whatever, you'll be fine. When I asked her about the 401k stuff and matching, she's like, no, you don't really need to do that. Like it depends on who you actually interact with sometimes, and they might not know everything. And if they don't know everything, they could steer you the wrong way. So do your research, ask multiple people, and ask a lot of questions.
So where are you at on the debt process? Have you been able to pay off the credit cards? Are the student loans forgiveness? Did you come to that yet? Like, where are you at with that?
Yeah, I am 5 years a slave still in the student loan forgiveness program. So I have 5 more years. It's a 10-year program of you paying it down, paying it out, paying it down. I have no more credit card debt. I'm actually up on my net worth by $200,000 now. So it's kind of cool because in 5 years, I went from negative to like super positive. So in the next 5 years, though, I actually plan to be a millionaire. So that should be interesting. So that's the story you kind of tell, because sometimes you share that with your friends, they laugh at you and they're like, oh, nah, it doesn't work. That doesn't work because nobody has ever done it. When you can actually prove it to them, bank statement or this or document after document, now it's something that people believe in. It could be a little bit more tangible. People get excited about that.
So how do you plan on getting there? Just more of the same things you've been doing? You're going to add some things to the mix? That's an audacious goal, $1 million.
It sounds audacious, but like I said, I've done the math, I've done the workout, and that's the trippy part. All this stuff I actually knew ever since I was a kid. I just never applied until it became almost too late. So in that sense, I had to learn from being at the bottom in order for it to climb back up and really start utilize things that I've seen my mom and my grandmother actually do the entirety of their lives. So I actually formulated another plan on top of the next max called the higher level max plan. So that way I was able to also, it's not really finessing. I don't want to call it that because that sounds like negative per se, but it's really to put the money into even higher levels of just working for itself. So your 401k, your HSAs need to be at $100,000 just working for themselves. You need to also start doing a little side hustling here and there. And you really need to work between you and your spouse. Because you can honestly, I think I could make it to $1 million eventually, but I'll definitely be able to make that with the right spouse. So I got my girlfriend; she's amazing, and we're gonna go down that take the marriage plunge at some point. And oh, she might listen to this though. So, but she's also on board with just really living a balanced life. I think we've all, a lot of times we see the Instagram people, we see everybody just living their best life, but in truth, they're hurting on the inside. But if you find somebody that you love and you find something that's pure and you just really enjoy the company, you could just make it through anything. And I think we want to prove to the world that we can make it through everything.
Yeah.
I love it. So if people want to keep up with you as you go on this journey, how can they find you?
They could I write a lot of financial literacy articles for free. All that information I just kind of ran through is available on my LinkedIn. So you could find me at Lawrence Gonzalez. I guess you could probably put it put it in the show notes.
Yep, absolutely.
LinkedIn/in/law.gonzalez. Or you could find me also promoting more financial literacy information through our website called unionstreet.com, which is the #1 Haitian American platform that we created just to actually support Haitian American communities and really grow and foster a community that's financially inclined and a lot smarter about our money. Because we have a lot of our parents worked 40 hours, like 50-hour weeks for 40 years with nothing to show for it. And we really want to change that up. And with gratitude, we want to pay that back as well.
And what about social media? Are you active there?
On social media, I'm usually active, but right now I'm actually taking a break to write a book. So you can find me at GQ_accountant on Instagram. But for right now, until February 2020, I'll probably going to be writing this book, and it's going to be, fairly affordable for a lot of people. So I really want this to be universal. I really want you to read it and have just actually start getting to action.
Awesome. Lawrence, this has been great information. Your story has been amazing. We are just proud of the effort, the work that you put in on your personal journey, as well as the work that you're putting in to help other people. So thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on and share with our audience today.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you guys for doing everything you do in the podcast. We listen to you guys every day, man, every day. It's actually good running music too.